Isn't it past your bedtime?
Hey, it's Mark Rodriguez here. There's a different podcast. It's not about wrestling this time. We're going to call this, I guess, the VGM podcast. And we got a special guest today. But first, let me introduce everyone that we have with us here today.
Hey, so this is Johnny Rodriguez. And, it's always a good welcome to be here on this podcast. Sorry.
And as always, it's me, Jack Nyes from Jack Nyes Reviews.
Hi, this is UA. First time here.
Hey, it's me, Jupi. What am I again? Oh, yeah, that's right. I'm supposed to be a ninja. I'm sorry I haven't been here a while. I kind of ninja'd my way out. Hi, everyone.
Yes. And today, our special guest is none other than the voice of Nina Williams, Sarah Bryant, Christie Monteiro, and Safina, amongst other characters from other games and series. We have the one and only Lisle Wilkersen.
Woo! Hi, everyone. The blonde geisha at your service.
There we go. And I'll start things off real quick. I was looking a bit of your history. Of course, one of the impressive things is that you actually grew up in Tokyo and got everything started there. And I saw that you actually started off like your first radio show when you were 19. How you swing that?
So I was always a huge music fan, starting from when I was like 2 or 3 years old, and the whole radio thing came up because there was a huge new radio station launching in Tokyo. It was like the international radio station, and somehow through some really crazy chain of events, I got a meeting with the people that were starting the radio station. So, so I went and I started working for the Morning Man. It wasn't as a radio DJ at first. I was working actually on the production side, which was a lot of fun. And that's kind of how it all started for me. I saw the Morning Man wake up every morning and play awesome music and just like entertain the city of Tokyo. And I thought, I would love to do that. So I started moonlighting and trying to figure out my own DJ skills. And then I got an audition and then I, got the job. So, I loved DJing. I did it for quite a while. It was a lot of fun.
What was it like growing up in Tokyo? And which time period did you grow up in Tokyo? Like, which decade?
Wow. Trying to find out how old I am, are we? Not really. So we moved there actually in the late 70s. I initially lived in the northern part of Japan, in Sendai, which is actually the center for the earthquake tsunami that happened. The whole world saw that happen in 2007.
Yeah, I was there when that happened.
Oh my, yeah. So I lived in Sendai for the first 3 years of my life, actually, in Japan. And then from there on, it was Tokyo. So it was a lot of the 80s, 90s. It was a great time to grow up there because, it's when, 80s music, all that whole thing, and that's when Shibuya started to really come into its own, and, I grew up right near Harajuku, so...
Oh, nice.
Yes, exactly. So, literally, I had no idea how good I had it in high school. Like, I would go meet up with my girlfriends and, classmates or whatever. We'd all meet up at the Shakey's in Harajuku and have lunch there. And then we go from there to, like, Kitty Land and all the really cool places, right? So that was kind of...
Oh, my gosh, you went to Kitty Land. I wanted to go. Never had the opportunity.
Yeah, Kitty Land is great. It's interesting because Kitty Land, which is a store, you guys might know, but it's this really cool store where a lot of the really, sometimes out there and crazy toy trends, sometimes really cool trends, a lot of them start out in Kitty Land, and I think actually, way back in the day, I think Tamagotchi was the first store to carry it, I believe, was at Kittyland in Harajuku. So a lot of the really cool trends start there. You see a lot of the Western American musicians, like I think, Marilyn Manson, who, is kind of a crazy boy anyway, but I think that's one of his favorite stores in Tokyo. Same with Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. So I would run into these people all the time. They were coming out of, it was kind of crazy. I was like, oh, Flea, coming out of Kittyland with some toys for his kids, but yeah, so that was kind of my, my backyard, I guess you would say. And I loved growing up in Tokyo. I mean, it's obviously a very different experience from growing up here. I went to international school, so for me, a one-way commute was about an hour and a half and 3 trains. So, it was a little bit of a pain in the butt, but it was a lot of fun. I mean, I loved just all the places that you could go and be safe and, and I didn't really, so interesting thing about growing up, in Japan, I didn't actually use Japanese that much until I started working radio, which is kind of bizarre because, people always think that, oh, you grew up there, you must have used Japanese the whole time you were, being raised there. But all my friends spoke in English, and even if they were Japanese, like they spoke English, right? And then my school was international school, so we used English. But to this day, probably because of growing up there and going to international school, my favorite form of communicating is what they call champo, which is English and Japanese mix. It's kind of like a Spanglish. So when I see I love talking to, my fellow Japanese peeps that way. But yeah, I loved it. I think it was also, there was a lot, there was, I will say, especially at the very beginning, I had to be very aware of the whole drunken ballerina, when I'm going home on the train, and especially, in high school, there was a lot of stuff that I had to be very aware of, and,
Oh God, I thought that was just like a stereotype or something.
Like, I think that...
Oh, no.
It's very real. It's very, very real.
Even I've experienced it, so yeah, it's true. Especially the drunk guys, unfortunately.
You can usually identify them because they have their tie wrapped around their head.
Correct. Yeah. And then, in the morning, I'll wake up and I'll be waiting at the train platform, and there'll be like a big lump of, ramen that's been digested and like thrown up all over.
Oh yeah, I've seen that too.
Yeah, but yeah, I loved it. I think there's something that, like, the whole American high school, junior high school kind of, the stuff that you see in, like, all the movies and everything, like prom and all that kind of stuff, I can't relate to at all because I never really even experienced any of that kind of stuff. But I think that the experience that I got was, me, I wouldn't trade it for the world. Yeah.
I have another question, if it's okay with you guys. Since you mentioned that you had to, travel so far and commute for your school, was the school in the Chiyoda ward or something like that?
No, it was in an area called Nerima.
Oh, Nerima! Oh gosh! Ooh! Wow! Oh,
yeah.
It's far.
Yeah. So I would get on at a station called Omotesando, which is it's
Omotesando.
Yeah, so it's, where Harajuku is. So I would get on there, and I would go from there to Nagatacho on the Hanzo. So I would go on the purple line, they call it, to Nagatacho, and then I would go up. At that time, I thought that had to be the world's longest elevator. It was so long. Every time I got on, I was like, oh my gosh, I just hope I get off this thing. But I would go up that, and then from there I'd change train lines to the Yurakucho line, and I would get off at Ikebukuro, which you've probably heard of before. It's featured in a lot of anime and manga.
Yeah, Ikebukuro, that was one of my main stations.
Yeah, so yeah. And then from Ikebukuro, I would take my final train, which is the Seibu Ikebukuro line, and then I would get off at a stop, which was actually right near Neriman. It was called Higashikurume, and that was where the school was.
Oh, that is super far.
Yeah.
I would have something like that. And I complained having to do a train and 2 buses. That was so much closer. Wow.
So, out of all the roles you played, which one would you say is your toughest role yet?
I want to say... Okay, so I actually did, and these are not video game characters, but this would be, if you guys are familiar with Bad Batsumaru, which is from Sanrio, which is like Hello Kitty's BFF, the angry penguin. In all honesty, that was absolutely the hardest role for me, character or role for me, because I had to do that in English and Japanese, so it was a mixture. And I had to do it in this really crazy, like, it was really high energy, and so that would be actually the hardest role. But I think as far as video game characters go, I would probably say Shuing Hong from Shenmue. It was a great character to do, but she was quite even-keeled and very kind of, almost very calm and very kind of, not monotone, but it was really hard for me. So the director kept telling me, no, you need to do it even more, flat. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Oh, wow, really?
Whereas I think that a lot of, yeah. And kept telling me that. So it was also and also with Shuing Hong, when we were recording Shenmue, I was also doing a radio show Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. And then I would go from there to the recording studio, to Sega Record Studio, which is another hike. I think from the radio station, it was about an hour away. So I would go, and I remember going in one day, and we were recording Shuing Hong's lines, and, I went up and was just doing like a test, mic check, and the director said, Lisle, are you getting a little bit of a cold? I'm like, wow, a little bit. He's like, yeah, no, you gotta go home. I was like, dang, man. So I didn't get to do anything that day. Because he's like, and I've never had that in all my years of radio. I've always been able to make it work, right? But, they were extremely picky about that kind of thing. And he's like, nope, go home. See you next time.
Someone who's aspiring to be a voice actress, I always like to hear which they were the most toughest.
Yeah.
Okay, so I would like to ask, because you were raised in Tokyo your formative years, what's the thing you like the most about Tokyo? And because, you're, how would I say this? Because you also live in the United States and Tokyo, right? If you go back and forth?
Yes, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what do you like about each, country respectively? Like, what do you like about the Japanese culture versus American culture or stuff?
Yeah. let me see. Well, what do I like? Okay, so starting off, and this is kind of more of a superficial kind of part of the Japanese culture, what I like about Japan. But I love the food, obviously. I love the pride in workmanship, that they have in Japan. I love the bakeries. Oh my gosh. So I have a friend from Japan from my radio days who's actually here in LA right now. And, I just saw him and we were kind of talking about some of our favorite things that we like to do when we go to Japan. And, I told him that mine is, one, make sure I go to a bakery and get all kinds of yummy breads, and two, the kombini. I love the convenience stores there, obviously, and I also love how they play with different kinds of flavors. I feel like, I don't know, I feel like they're just so much more playful with that, and so I really, I don't know. But I do love that, and I love the food. Things that I don't like as much about Japan, I would say, are probably that they are just hell-bent on sticking with the rules. You can't veer away from the menu, or, I remember one time, and this is actually when I was still living in Japan, and I had just finished doing a radio show. I was tired, but I had another show that I was doing for NHK, which is like the Tokyo or Japanese equivalent of a PBS, right? So they're a huge media company conglomerate in Japan, and so I had a show that I was doing for them too. And so I was like, okay, I just finished, being all ginky and happy, cheerful for 3 hours. I need a caffeine pick-me-up. So I went by the Pronto, which is a coffee chain, kind of similar to like a Starbucks. And I went by the one that I always go to, right near NHK, and I told them I would like 2 cafe lattes, iced cafe lattes with light on ice. Right? And I've gotten it many times before. And what do you know? The woman was like, chatto, dekinai desu ne. Right? She's like, oh, you can't do that. And I'm like, huh? What do you mean you can't do that? I just did that last week or a few days ago, whatever. Yeah. Like, we can't do the light on ice. And it was just not a good day for her to pick on me like that, because I was like, Lisle, I think I used to discuss oil. And then, I was like, who said that? And she's like, manager. And I'm like, really? Did your manager actually say this? And I just picked up. I was just picking a fight, and it was a losing battle, and I was just like, oh my gosh. I ended up not even buying the iced cafe latte and just walking to NHK feeling so defeated. But, I think that is one of the things about the Japanese society and Japanese culture that sometimes kind of drives me crazy, where now for me, being here for about 10 years, I'm used to the flexibility that you're allowed a lot of times. And it's not just restaurants. I mean, even returning stuff, right? In Japan, actually quite hard to make returns. There's some places that will do it, but a lot of places won't, and I, for the longest time, I think for like a year and a half, I moved here to the States. I would have something, I'd be like, oh, I don't think I like it. Oh, well, maybe I'll just give it to someone. And then one of my friends would be like, well, why don't you return it? I'm like, oh, yeah, in this country, you can return things.
Oh, God.
And it was just, I can't.
Yeah, everything is final,
yeah,
right?
I mean, yeah,
Oh.
And I do think that, things are changing. So you can find places, but in average, even the big, really cool, you know, superstores like the Don Quixotes that you find, which are, it's almost like a Ross where they have everything and anything. There's no rhyme or reason to the way the store is displayed, you know, but it's one of my favorite places to go. And
that's where I got my work speaker from that I'm using now.
oh, really?
Awesome.
Yes, I love it. It's a great store, right? It's all over Japan, and it's quite cheap, and you can always find some really good stuff. So a couple of years ago, on one of my trips to Japan, I actually bought some really cool headphones or earphones, you know, kind of earbuddy kind of things, and they were pink, they were super cute. So then I took them back to my hotel room and tried them on, and I was like, I don't think I like them very much. So literally the next day, I took them back with my receipt, and they're like, yeah, chosto, dame desu ne. I'm like, oh my gosh, you have to be kidding me. So I ended up giving it to my niece, so that was good for her. But yeah, I just, you know, even when I go back and I have business trips or whatnot, I always have to kind of remind myself, okay, get back into that mode. You know, you're back in Japan. This is how things are. And I think in that aspect too, for me, being here in the States been liberating in that sense, you know. And I don't know, I find that there's just more space. But then also, I mean, I'm in, you know, it just feels kind of in some ways to be a little bit freer, I think. And also maybe just because of where I live, and also apartments obviously are a lot, you know, you can get a bigger space here, even though real estate prices, rent is pretty high in LA, but that compared to Tokyo, you know, I mean, the prices are a lot more in Japan. So I think that I like that about, you know, the state, living here and living in LA. But I do miss the lunch set that you can get in Tokyo that's only, you know, I don't know, $6 or $7, and it's a great set, really high quality food, delicious. Get a salad, an entree, usually a little bit of bread, and you get a drink, and you get dessert, you know, and you could never find that here in LA for that price point. So I do miss that a lot. Do you think that as far as, for me, my take on, just because I spent about 30 years, I lived there for about 30 years, so altogether, I want to say that, you know, obviously I've lived in Japan for much longer, but I feel like I've taken both cultures and kind of created my own culture, kind of like my third world, you know, they call us PCK, third world culture, they're third culture kids, where, you know, we're from one culture, but we grow up in another culture, and we create our own culture. So that's kind of, you know, to this day, I take pride in that, because I'm glad, really, that I grew up in a different culture, and that, you know, I mean, obviously I can't win a lot of Trivia Pursuit games because I know nothing about pop culture here in the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s, you know, I know absolutely nothing about any of that, except for what I know from, like, my radio work in Japan, but basically it's a very different experience. So yeah, I do take from both, and I kind of create my own lethal world.
That sounds pretty awesome.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I actually have a little thing to tell you, and also I have a question. So your first role you ever did was Jenna in the arcade version of Crazy Taxi, correct?
Correct.
So you are actually a part of video game history because you were the first. That character Jenna was the very first playable female driver in video games. So there was never a character, a female character that you could play that was a driving character ever in a video game. Like there was actually no driving female character before Jenna from Crazy Taxi.
So that was like before Mario Kart or whatever?
Well, technically, Peach was an unlockable character, but I'm saying in an arcade, she was the first in an arcade setting. Because Mario Kart didn't come out in arcades until later, until after, I want to say 2000? It didn't come out until 2000 in the arcade settings. But yeah, anyway, that's just, it's also funny that you were in all 3 Crazy Taxis, so I did find that funny.
Much fun. I loved Crazy Taxi. Yeah.
I still to this day do the voice all the time with my friends. I do the intro guy voice. And then, anyway, the question I actually had for you was, in, you were also in Lost in Translation, which is one of my favorite movies. Do you have any, like, kind of fun on-set stories from that, or meeting Bill Murray or Scarlett Johansson or anything?
So Lost in Translation, which is a Sofia Coppola film, and is loosely based on Sofia Coppola's life. I don't know if you knew that, but so she used to go to Japan quite often with her then fiancé, and then later turned out to be her husband, Mike Jones, right, who's a big director as well. This is back in the 90s. And he would go over there all the time and do big budget, music videos for a lot of Japanese artists as well as, American artists as well. But then also commercials. So he was really into bands. I did, and also during that same time, I did a lot of artist interviews for a show called Countdown TV. And and I was asked to do, this, and we did it at the Grand Hyatt, which is where Lost in Translation takes place. Don't worry, it's related to the film. But
no,
so I had to go there. I had to go in there one day to do an interview. It was a TV interview for a American rock band called Sonic Youth, right? And they were there promoting their album and doing a live showcase. And so went in there with the crew, and we're setting up, and I'm getting ready to do my interview, and all of a sudden, we're in the suite, and all of a sudden the suite door opens up, and this girl just comes in. Hey, guys, can I hang out with you guys? And I'm like, who the heck is that, right? And she was kind of bratty, man. Every time, I'm trying to develop this, synergy, because that's what I like to do with whoever I'm interviewing, right? Want to make them feel comfortable with me and, kind of get a rhythm going. And which I'm sure you guys, doing your podcast, you do that a lot too. But she would kind of interject every once in a while, and I'd be like, oh my gosh. So, but we get through the interview, and then I'm leaving the hotel with the crew, and I said to one of the crew members, I was like, who was that? And they're like, oh, Lisa-san, that was Sofia Coppola. So that was my first time meeting Sofia. Fast forward to literally 10 years later, and I get this call from an agency that I don't really work that much with, right? And they're like, there's a movie that's going to be filming in Tokyo, and they have a few parts that they are auditioning for here, and we want to send you in, send you off for the audition. Like, okay, yeah, sure. And then, they don't give you any kind of information about who's in it, whatnot. They usually with auditions like that, they really don't give you very much information at all, right? So then, the day before the audition, I'm at the grocery store that I always go to, called Peacock Grocery Store. And I'm just looking through the fruit and, produce section, and then I look, and there's Sophia Coppola. I'm like, well, I meet again, right? I don't talk to her, though, because I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, interesting. And then the next day, I go to the audition, and, at first, it's a cattle call because it's just like so many people were there, right? And so we get there, and there's this Japanese guy who's kind of in charge of the casting. So he was taking photos and everything. He'd be like, okay, this was with a Polaroid camera, and be like, okay, turn to your left, turn to your right, turn to your back, blah, blah, blah. Do this, do that. So I did the obligatory, taking photos, blah, blah. And then I'm getting ready to leave the room, and I get this little tap on my shoulder, and it's, this Japanese guy is like, Lisa-san, can you come over here? We'd like to get some more pictures. And so I'm like, yeah, sure, no problem. And then they, usher me over to the corner of the room, and then all of a sudden, there's Sophia Coppola. I'm like, I see. And so, anyway, and then, she was like telling me, she said, okay, I'd like, this kind, I want her to do this kind of, like she's just kind of whispering to the, the guy who's taking the photos. So I'm like, that makes sense. Okay, so that's why I saw her yesterday in my grocery store. I'm like, Sophia, we have to stop meeting like this. Is kind of what I thought, and I didn't say that. But then I find out that I got, the role. And so it's like, okay, well, that will be so interesting because, of course, I'm meeting her 10 years later, right? So I was very curious to see how everything would be. And I was also very excited because my scenes are with Bill Murray, so that was really cool, too. But she was just completely different. I mean, obviously she's not a early 20s, kind of like just starting off anymore, right? She's a very established director by then. So it was just fabulous working with her. And, she basically told me, when I came to set, and she was like, okay, so, these are the lines I gave for the sexy businesswoman, but you don't have to go by that. As long as you get the gist of that, then that's totally fine. And so it's like, okay, cool. So that was really, it was really great. And for me, it was just such a fun little full circle moment to have, to actually have seen and met her during that time period that Lost in Translation is about, right? That was kind of fun. Working with Bill Murray was awesome. The filming of Lost in Translation was done in, I believe, 2.5 weeks. In Tokyo, they don't give you very much time to film in the city, right? Because they feel like you'll disrupt the city and the flow of the city. So they're extremely strict about that. I think they've changed a little bit. They've loosened it a little bit. But, back then, that's how it was. And the Grand Hyatt, or Park Hyatt, rather, was extremely strict about filming in the hotel, right? So they're like, okay, all the hotel scenes need to be filmed at night. You cannot film after, I think it was 10 a.m., from 10 a.m. until 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. you could not film. So they were on a pretty crazy schedule filming, especially with someone like, Scarlett Johansson and Bill Murray, right, who have so many scenes that they have to do. But Bill Murray was, very gracious and just, he was just trying to keep the energy up on set. And I'm sure everybody was tired. And he was like, yeah, like telling all kinds of jokes and doing this and doing that. So it was a really good experience. I really enjoyed being a part of that. And I just remember when the movie, it went to Venice Film Festival first. It was interesting to me because when I met Scarlett Johansson, so I have the scene where I actually go up to Bill Murray or Bob Harris and I'm talking to him, in the lobby. I head into the elevator after that. So actually, and I don't think this shows in the movie, but no, it doesn't. But actually, Scarlett Johansson is waiting in the elevator. So I would, we kept doing that scene over and over because there were some problems with the lighting and stuff. But I just remember seeing her thinking, oh, because she was 18, right? She was really young. Mm-hmm. And she looked young when I met her. And then I remember, seeing the photos from the red carpet for Lost in Translation and then the film festival. And I'm like, oh my gosh, she looks like a different creature. Like she just looks glamorous and very Hollywood, I really did not recognize her at first. I was like, wow, okay. Because she was now an adult. It was a really cool experience to be a part of. And I'm so proud of, just having a part in that film. Yeah.
So you basically got to hang out with a Ghostbuster and an Avenger.
Correct. That would be correct.
I got another question here, because since a lot of your stuff came from radio shows, like how did that lead into somehow voicing Nina Williams and all them? Like how did those auditions go? Because I mean nowadays, of course, they got like these 2-hour long, cinematic modes where the characters are talking a lot. But I think back in the day of like Tekken 4 and 5, it was just a couple of catchphrases and all the martial arts yells and stuff. So like how do you audition for those, or was there anything in particular, or what were they saying?
Yeah, so that all started, so really my voice acting work started with, I was on the radio as a DJ and someone who does casting for a lot of voice work, everything from company promo videos to, commercials to video games. She happened to hear, she heard me on the radio and so she reached out to me. She's like, why don't you come in? We'll make a custom demo tape. And because that's kind of how it worked back then, in Tokyo, where an agency would have your demo tape, which would have different styles of voices that you do. And for me, it would be, various, like a high pitch or lower pitch, lower tone, but then also a Japanese sample and an English sample. So I did that, and then usually how video games would work is they would first send off that demo reel, and then if the client liked that, then sometimes you would have to come in person. There were some video games I did where, they'd be like, okay, yep, this is exactly what we're looking for. So and then they just booked the job. So it really depended, on the game, I guess, and the studio. And I will also say that I started doing a lot of the video games in the 90s when there was no IMDb and, so I think there's tons of stuff out there that I've done voices for that I have no idea about, because that's another thing. We would go in to record a job and we were not given really any details on the project, on how big the project was. You wouldn't know the title. You would just come in. They'd be like, okay, you have to, read for this character. And then sometimes they would have videos, sometimes they wouldn't. Sometimes it'd be just illustrations of the character. So it was kind of all over, depending on the game and how far along it was, or whatnot.
Of those characters, though, which one would be your favorite between Nina and Christie and Sarah, Bryant, and all them?
That's a very good question. I do, so I think it would probably have to be between Sarah and Nina. What I like about Sarah is she, to me, is a much more serious character in a way. She has a more serious personality, I find, than Sarah. I think Sarah is a little bit more cheeky and sassy, and I think I probably part of me identifies with Sarah because I'm that kind of person. I always, I'm like a wise ass sometimes. I'm like, hey, I always like to do that kind of thing. And that way I think that I love Sarah, but I also love how Nina is such a strong character, and yet she does have this weakness of family, especially with like Anna, and I feel like I really like her complicated history and characters. So I do love Nina. And I will also say that because I am a terrible, terrible butt matcher, I can do very well with Nina. I do this, panel a lot of times when I go to anime conventions where I play Tekken against fans, and sometimes I win with Nina. She's pretty badass, So I'm like, okay, I'll just like punch any button. Da, 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 da. I'm like, hey, I won. Woo! Whoever knew, But I feel like I can't ever do that with Sarah. I don't know. To me, she seems a little bit more complicated to do. What do I know? Like I said, I'm a terrible button masher. So I don't know.
What advice would you give yourself near the start of your career?
I don't know, actually. I mean, there are quite a few things that I've learned, but I think for me, and I've learned them the hard way a lot of times, but I don't know if I would change that. I think that there's so many things like about being flexible and being able to pivot really quickly, because I feel like with the entertainment industry and just being, when you're self-employed / independent contractor, you have to be very flexible because you never know when the markets could change, and that's one thing that I do tell people a lot who are thinking about getting into whatever, what if it's voice acting or even if it's entertainment related, you have to be able to be okay with taking risks. I think that, it's no risk, no reward kind of industry. And I've talked to many other voice actors, and, that's some of the advice that they give as well. But, a lot of times we'll do these voice acting panels, and, and usually that's my advice, but sometimes someone's already given it. So I'm like, okay. But I think that, that about being really flexible and also being very diligent in always learning. And, sometimes people will say, well, I only want to do voices for video games, or for anime. And I tell them, well, but it's a really good idea to kind of try everything because you just never know. You could meet someone and then, it's also a lot about networking too, right? So you just never know. You might meet someone who might end up 10 years later being able to give you a job, or, so you should always kind of try out stuff. Not everything, but, be really open to things that you don't necessarily want to do, or, and I'm not saying it as a principle kind of, like if you have principles and you're like, okay, I don't want to do that because it goes against what I believe in or something like that. Totally fine. But, you know, sometimes I'll meet people at anime conventions and they're like, I only want to do anime. I'm like, wow, anime honestly does not pay that well. So you probably want to branch off and do other stuff as well. And just because it's also good for the experience, because voice acting is all about life experience as well. And so it's really important to kind of keep that in mind, I think.
All right, thank you. That's actually some really
Answer your
helpful
question?
advice. Yeah.
What was your opinion when you got cast to work on the game Rumble Roses?
That was, honestly, I just went in, recorded. I do kind of remember seeing, I think at that time there was no video. We just got sketches to look at.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but it was one of those things where, okay, this is your character, and this Rumble Roses experience is very similar to a lot of the other games that I did, where they're like, okay, I have a meeting with the director, and they'll be like, okay, this is your character. They show me some illustrations, and they're like, this is the kind of voice we're thinking. I'm like, okay. So I go into the vocal booth, and usually what happens is I give them a few voices, like, maybe that, but a little bit higher, or a little bit lower, more energy, or lower energy, whatever. And then they find one that they like and stick with it. So I just remember going in for Rumble Roses, and I think I went in with another voice actor as well. If I don't know, I might not be remembering correctly, but yeah. So I went in, did my thing, and then I left. I mean, it really was not. I wasn't in for, I don't think, that long. But yeah, you know, I love the fact that I did that, though, because I know you guys do a lot with wrestling and stuff too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not, you know, in women's wrestling, as I'm sure you're aware, is huge in Japan. And, you know, I wasn't in a wrestling match, but I don't know if you guys know this, but I was actually, weirdly enough, in an actual MMA fight, which is beyond strange because I'm not a fighter, but, you know, only in Japan can you have an experience like this. And it was the same agency, by the way, that I did the Lost in Translation for. That just goes to show, you know, but it's probably one of the most surreal and yet one of the most amazing experiences and stories I will ever have.
Wait, so the same agency who got you into a cage fight were the same ones who got you on Lost in Translation? So it was like, so it basically went, okay, we're going to have you in this very deep, somber, coming-of-age story, and then next week we'll have you in a cage fight.
Basically, yeah. And that all started, actually, so this was around 2006. I started doing a lot of training, working out with a guy who, he would do this interval training kind of thing, which is now really popular, but back then it still wasn't that popular, you know, but we would incorporate a lot of boxing moves in it. And I absolutely loved it. I had these awesome leopard print gloves, and I was all right? I was like, I love hitting things, man. I love it. And then, I don't know, because I am kind of crazy, I think. My mom tells me I am, so I probably am. But I just all of a sudden had this idea. I thought, well, maybe I can make this documentary about me in my 30s, late 30s, training to be a boxer, and the final scene, or like the final event, you know, part of the documentary will be I actually have a fight, right? So I thought this was like a brilliant idea. It can be all about, hey, you can start over, or you can do whatever you want in your life at any time, kind of thing. And, you know, and I wanted to, you know, also be able to document like the craziness of the insane training and stuff like that. I was all over it. So what I did was I approached the agency, Lost in Translation agency. I was like, okay, guys, Seth, I'm thinking about doing this, and I want to know, what do you think? You know, because they also actually manage a few fighters, believe it or not. It's a crazy thing. So they're like, oh, Lisa, such a good idea. I love it. I love it. I love it. So I walked home, you know, thinking, okay, that was a good meeting. Literally the next month, this is January of 2007, I believe, I get a call from them, and they're like, Lisa-san, how would you like to be in a fight? I'm like, what? Whoa, wait, what are you talking about? And they're like, so one of our fighters who's currently, you know, like getting ready for a fight, which is coming up, by the way, in 2 weeks. Thank you very much. She got hurt during her practice, and she's in the hospital, so we need to find another opponent. And, you know, you did do this whole spiel about the documentary, so maybe you'd want to be in this fight. I'm like, oh, my God, she's got to be kidding me. That's a very different story, guys. So anyway, long story short, I decided to go for it, and it was a crazy scenario. Yeah.
How did the fight go?
And like I said, I would not. Huh?
How did the fight go?
Oh, how did the fight go?
So what happened was, this woman who I was fighting against, so I came as like a boxing, it was an MMA fight, you know, I came from like a boxing background, she was like kickboxer, and it was actually a kind of fight, right? So I actually practiced with her 4 or 5 times. I think, you know, we only had 2 weeks to prepare for the fight, so, but, you know, she kept telling me as well, you know, we had so basically I told the agency, I said, okay, guys, I will do this fight if you set me up with my opponent. I want to meet her, and I want to meet her manager. If I get a good feeling, I'm all about gut feelings. I really trust my gut a lot. So I said, I want to meet them, and if I feel good about it, I'll do it. Even though it's crazy, even though I shouldn't, I'll do it, right? So we actually met up in a karaoke box, because she's an actual fighter, so she actually has a career going on. So they didn't want us to be seen together. So we had to meet at night in an area called Roppongi, and we got carried away to like this karaoke room. Yep. And, you know, that's when, you know, she started telling me, she's like, okay, so these are some of my signature moves. I was like, yeah, I'm not doing that. No, you cannot do that. Oh, no. And, you know, we came up with a few moves that would work for me, I'd be okay with. I was like, don't touch his face. No, you know. And we were off. And we did some practice. And she kept telling me, she's like, just because this is a fixed fight, you need to understand, when I get in the ring, my adrenaline will kick in. You will get hurt. I'm like, that's okay. I was in sports my whole life. I was always extremely active. So I said, yeah, I'm totally fine with that. As long as you don't, you know, really hurt me, so I'm in the hospital like the woman I'm replacing, I'm okay. Yeah, so we did it, and it went well. We kind of had it choreographed a little bit, but then once more, just because we had things figured out, once you get into the ring, you know, I mean, really, I could have forgotten everything, and it could have all got haywire, you know, it could have just all gone wrong. So I do feel very fortunate that things actually went quite well. And fun fact, when I got to the venue that day of my fight, I found out that I was there for a championship match, which I had no idea. And that was crazy.
Oh, snap.
I was like,
That was a
great,
championship
thanks.
match?
Okay. Exactly. Yes. I think
No pressure. No pressure.
Things where no pressure. Exactly. Yeah. And this is one thing, and this is another thing that sometimes I will give advice to people about. Well, definitely don't be in an MMA fight. But besides that, I'll tell people that, because obviously I was way, way over my head, right? I mean, this whole thing was just crazy. And I remember about half an hour, 45 minutes before my fight, I'm kind of freaking out, because I find out that I'm in the championship match, so we're quote unquote fighting for a belt, right? And I see the referee. He's practicing, the English spiel that he has to, make an announcement. This is a certified fight, blah, 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 right? So I'm looking at that thinking, what did I get myself into, man? This is absolutely bonkers. I can't even believe I did this to myself. But I've learned, and I keep going back to this with jobs, not very similar to this, but with jobs where I feel like I'm over my head. I find a way to recenter myself, and that's what I did with that fight. I was like, okay, things are a bit crazy. I need to go, and I need to find a place to just kind of center and focus my energy so I can, get back to no crazy, like out of whack nerves or, and there was this little room that was right near the entrance for where I was going to go in, and it had a monitor which showed the ring, right? I mean, right, of course there was someone that was fighting, but in the ring at that time, but this monitor had it was just a still picture of a ring with no one in it. And I'm like, okay, this is what I need to do. I need to actually just focus on that ring and just look at it and imagine how things were going to be. Like, go back to everything that I learned and everything that we had practiced and, just kind of go over everything until I felt better about the situation. So that's what I did. And I do that with all my work that I do, whether it be voice acting or if it's interpreting or if it's with a film or, something like that, or even doing MC work and stuff like that. When I'm in a situation where, things are thrown at me, I'm like, well, you did not tell me any of that, and all of a sudden things become 10 times more complicated. I always remember that technique where I go back and I'm like, okay, recenter, refocus, and I think that that's a really important thing to use, not just in, work, but I think even in life, I've done that a lot during this past year with, our whole the COVID and, I mean, just everything that's gone on the past year in the world, I feel like there's a lot of anxiety and people are feeling, really stressed and really frustrated, which I completely understand. And, I try to kind of keep that in mind in my everyday life too, where I'm like, okay, Lisle, just calm down, just refocus, recenter. And there you go.
Now, when it comes to anime conventions and stuff, like, do they come to you or your agent has to tell you or something? Like, you can't, like, I guess ask them or something? Because it would be super awesome once all this stuff calms down and if we have, what's it called, either the Level Up Expo or the ShineCon Vegas 2 that was postponed over and over and over again. It'd be awesome to see you there if, assuming we can all make it there, but...
Yeah.
Like, does your agent get to you, or do you, like, ask them, like, hey, there's a crowd in town, need an extra person, or?
Actually, so with anime conventions and gaming conventions, I don't have an agent. So I just always work directly with the event. Sometimes they will approach me. Sometimes I'll approach them. It really all depends. I am all about, I don't know. I think that because I've worked on my own, I mean, I've been self-employed since I was 19. You know, even in my years of radio and everything, when I was first getting started, I've never really worked for only one company or only one agency exclusively. And I really enjoy that because I love being able to quickly pivot into something else, you know. There's some people that work better with just one agency or just one company, and that's completely fine, but that's kind of not who I am. It's just like with the different jobs, you know, I do all kinds of work, and some people just want to focus on voice acting, or they just want to focus on acting, and that's totally fine too. I'm not that kind of person. I like to do all kinds of stuff, and I really enjoy that, and being able to use both sides of my brain, and, you know, just learning different skills and honing different skills. So, yeah, so with conventions, you know, at first I had someone who was kind of acting as an agent, but I just thought, you know, I think I could probably handle this better by myself. So I started doing that, and I haven't looked back. Yeah. So, yeah. I'm always out there, you know, hearing from different con chairmen, owners, or guest relations. You know, they'll approach me, and sometimes I'll approach them. So it all depends. But it would be great to see you guys at a con. Absolutely. I can't wait to get back to that.
I just keep imagining myself like Lisle getting ready for the big match, and there's all the lights and whatever, and then like the opponent shows up, and they hand the opponent the mic, and the opponent's like, if she dies, and you're like, wait, what now?
So when you're going back to the anime conventions, when you're at an anime convention, do you still have like free time to still kind of like explore the, you know, the city, the location you're at during that time, or you just really don't have much time to do any?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. It really depends on the convention. There's some where I don't get that much time. I do, every year I work with, I always work with Kauai-Con in Hawaii and ALA, which is, you know, Anime Atlanta, right? So yeah. I worked at both of the, Anime Atlanta, is it AWA, sorry, not ALA, what am I talking about? And usually with those, because I do a lot of interpreting, but I do a lot of moderating because they have big Japanese industry guests. So sometimes I will go around the city with the guests, and kind of help them out a little bit. But usually with those, I'm kind of exhausted because it works me pretty hard. So, you know, I mean, I'm doing like 4 or 5 hours a day. You know, it's kind of, we've figured out a way to where it's not too much, because it's also, you know, I love hosting my own panels and everything, and that's totally fine. But when you're moderating and interpreting for a panel, you are having to be completely engaged for that whole, whatever it is, hour and a half. It's everything that goes on, and you're having to like flip back and forth, English, Japanese, English, Japanese, English, Japanese, and it's quite exhausting. And then, you know, also like keep energy going, and so, you know, you can't do like 2 or 3 hours in a row. I mean, you can, but it's kind of unfair to the guests, right? So I would always tell them, I need a break. Like, you can maybe do a 15-minute break, and then I can do another hour or whatever. But with those, I usually don't really get that much of an opportunity to go around. But some of the other ones, I've had wonderful experiences, you know, where I've been able to, you know, just tour around the city. I went to actually Saudi Arabia for Comic-Con, and that was like 4 or 5 years ago, and that was absolutely amazing because they did give us a whole day where they took us around, and we went to see a mosque and we went to see this, and we went to see this, you know, all these really cool things. So that was a lot of fun. So I do enjoy that aspect of things as well. Absolutely.
I did have one question. Since you grew up in Japan, I was kind of curious. Did you have, or do you have, any particular idol group that you like?
No, I wasn't really that big into idol groups. I played them a lot on radio. And I will also say that, okay, so at the time, Morning Musume was huge, right?
I love Morning Musume.
There was a period. Okay, so yeah, so Morning Musume this, Morning Musume that. So I was always poo-pooing Morning. I'm like, I don't like them. I was like stupid. Okay, so then fast forward to, I moved here to the States. I get a phone call about 6 years ago, from someone I know who runs a TV production here in LA, right? And they're like, so we need an interpreter for an idol that is going to be here in the States. We're filming in LA and in Montreal and then Salt Lake City. So it was like a 5-day job, right? I'm like, oh, awesome. Okay, yeah, totally. So come to realize it's one of the members of Morning Musume. And we hit it off. Oh, wow. She, to this day, when I go to Japan, I always see her. I know her and her husband. She got married a few years ago. She has a baby. But I go and hang out with them. I absolutely love her. She's like, so now, you know, people like, do you like Morning Musume? Yes, of course I do. You know, back in the day, it's like, you know. But I was poo-pooing all kinds of music. I mean, you know, I was known for that. I was like, what? Spice Girls? They'll never do anything. No, they'll never be big.
No, they were for like 2 minutes.
I was just wondering now, since you mentioned that they were Morning Musume, what about just the singers or groups in general that were from Japan? Were you really into any of them? I mean, you mentioned the whole idol thing, you weren't really.
Yeah. No, and this is another thing, and so I have a Twitch stream that I do every Fridays called The Adventures of One Geisha, and I've actually brought this up a couple times on my Twitch stream, but there has been, oh my gosh, there's so much incredible music that comes out of Japan. And, you know, I've met or worked with, you know, or interviewed some of these people. Like, actually, when Amuro Namie, who of course is huge, right?
Oh my God!
Yeah?
I hated the fact that Mr. Final Concert, though.
Yeah, I have a friend who, by the way, worked for that agency that sent me out to the MMA fight and also lost the translation. She used to work for that agency, but she is probably one of the biggest Amuro Namie fans I know, and she went to the final concert, and she talked about it, and oh my gosh, she was just destroyed that, you know, that Amuro Namie was retiring. But I met and interviewed her for actually the same TV show, Countdown Group, the one that I did, you know, for Lost in Translation, the song that you sang. I interviewed her as she was starting out as a solo artist.
Oh, so like mid-90s or so?
Yeah. She was a cute little teenage thing, you know, just getting started, and
I have her first solo. I have her first solo CD. See, I collect her stuff, so yeah.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so she did an interview with us to promote her debut album. So I did interview with her, which is really cool. There's a lot of music that coming from the 90s called Shibuya-ke, which basically means of Shibuya. And it was this really amazing creative time in Shibuya because 80s was when Shibuya was just starting to come around, you know. I mean, 80s was really all about Harajuku, right? So people would, if they wanted to go somewhere for awesome youth culture / music, it's fun, super cool, whatever, they would go to Harajuku. But towards the end of the 80s and then into the 90s is where all of a sudden it was the Shibuya splash. And Shibuya kind of took over, you know, and it was really the place to go. And it was where you would see all the teenagers in their Luzusoksu, and, you know, you'd see. So I was there during that time, and I saw a lot of the incredible music that came out from there. And it would be everything from a Namuro Amie, like a pop, like a really straight up kind of pop singer, you know, to singer-songwriter, like breathy, like there was a girl, her name was Chara.
I know her.
Incredible. Okay, yeah. So she was huge back then. There were a lot of these female singer-songwriters that came out that expressed themselves, and they were very creative, and they just had this really interesting and kind of eclectic approach to music. And then you would have also this acid jazz groove that came out, and you'd have a lot of hip hop that started to come out that time too. And then you'd have there was a group called Pizzicato 5, which got a lot of influence from French.
I love Pizzicato 5. They're so good.
Okay. Yes. So I interviewed the lead from Pizzicato 5 as well, way back in the day. But yeah, so, you know, I mean, there was all this, just really, really cool time and music. So I think that for me was probably the sweet spot. However, there's a lot of great stuff out in Japan. I mean, you have people like Southern All-Stars, who are classic. They're almost like a Rolling Stones of Japan, right? They've been around forever, super respected. I mean, even people in the music industry can't get their tickets to concerts a lot of times because everyone wants to go. Just incredible performances.
Do you like Gawked? Oh, I said, do you like Gawked?
Really, Gakto?
Gakto, yeah, sorry.
He's okay. But one person I did work with who I really loved was Hyde from Larkon Show.
Yes! Yes!
Yeah.
Sorry.
I got to meet him once. He's very nice.
Yeah, he's so nice, and he's so I'm a huge Prince fan. Huge Prince fan. Mm-hmm. And I actually did an event with him. I worked with him twice. So there was one DVD that came out that was a DVD best of videos and of L'Arc-en-Ciel. And they wanted this English commentary for the DVD. So they wanted to use my voice. So I showed up for the voice, and Hyde is there, right? And he's extremely hands-on with everything. So he was the only one that was there from the band. But, so that was my first time working for him. And then fast forward a few years later, I get a phone call from one of my agents that I'm working with, and she's like, Hyde is doing a fan event and wants to do it in Alice in Wonderland theme, and Lisle, they want to use you. I'm like, okay, what exactly does that mean? I'm not sure. So I had to dress like Alice in Wonderland. And then, but, because Hyde is he's a visionary. I feel like he has, he's like, okay, this is what I want, and I'm going to create it so it is exactly like that, right? It's very, very, very particular, every little detail. So I had to get there a couple hours earlier. I was there pretty much all day. It was held at a place called Akasaka Blitz, which is in Akasaka. It's this big venue. And And yeah, it was just really incredible. And so I got to kind of see his process as well, work with him. And I remember walking away thinking, he reminds me of a prince, just kind of the way he's extremely involved in every little detail of everything. And yeah, he was great to work with. I loved working with him. I mean, he was, I don't know, 3 times as tall as him. Oh well, but I loved him.
I wish I could meet like a Japanese singer or group or so, that I may, I really like or something. Besides,
well, maybe. Don't give up. You never know. You might be able to. I never thought, honestly, I would have the experiences that I had. I would take the path that I took. And this is another thing that I tell people a lot of times at the conventions, we do like the voice acting panels, where all the voice actors come together and answer questions and that. I tell, another thing that sometimes I will bring up is never say never, because if I had said no to some of the experiences in my life, I wouldn't have gotten to, have some extraordinary experiences, right? So I'm all about taking the risk and just kind of hopping into the moment and figuring it out, seeing what happens. And, if you fail, you fail, whatever. Who doesn't fail? Everyone has their moments of failure, so it's all good. It's really important to kind of enjoy the process and just figure it out.
Do you have any current projects you're working on? I know that probably a lot of stuff is either on hold or delayed or postponed due to the current, world situation and all that. But do you have any current projects or things that you were maybe working on but got postponed due to this? Or
there is something that I'm going to start working on soon. That's kind of exciting, and unfortunately I can't talk about it because I've signed an NDA for it. But yeah, it should be a lot of fun. That's all I can say.
All right, so I know, mostly you did most of your voice work. I know it is mostly for gaming, but have you met any Japanese seiyuu that maybe someone in the Western world would know about?
I do meet a lot of the Japanese seiyuu because at the events Atlanta Weekend, Anime Weekend, Atlanta, AWA, or KawaiiCon, or even AX, I'll do a lot of the moderating and interpreting and, for these big industry /seiyuu. So I have met quite a few. Let me see. So I didn't I worked with, I was interpreting for the woman behind the voice of Naruto. Yes, and
I've met her too.
She's awesome. I absolutely loved her. I found it really interesting because I think she's from Osaka, if I'm not wrong. And her voice, she kind of had a husky voice, and she was so kind of raw and authentic, and I just absolutely loved her and had such a great time. That was actually for the Comic-Con. She was over in San Diego for Comic-Con. They were doing a documentary, I think, on her, and so I was there to kind of help with interpreting and everything. Let me see, some of the people who I've worked with, also Furukawa. I don't know if you guys know who Furukawa Toshio is, but he is a super well-established voice actor, seiyuu, and I absolutely love him. I've worked with both him and his wife quite a few times. So I go when I'm in Japan, I'll usually try to meet up with them as well. He is represented by Aoni, which is, one of the big seiyuu companies or agencies in Japan. He does voices for Gundam. He does One Piece. He does Dragon Ball Z.
Oh.
Yeah,
He does all
I
kinds
think I know him. Yeah, he's done a lot of. I think his most famous thing is from Urusei Yatsura, right? I believe that's his most famous thing.
Say yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And another kind of full circle moment for me, which was kind of, I didn't even think about it until like the second time I met and worked with him. But when I was growing up, so my dad is a linguistics professor and worked with one of the big private Japanese universities in Japan. And he actually did a project with another professor, Japanese professor, where they turned Urusei Yatsura manga into an English textbook. And so my dad is actually co-author of that. So I actually have a copy of it. And this was back in the day, and, when I saw him the second time around, I was like, oh my gosh, Toshio-san, I need to get you that, we're just saying Yatsura, textbook, so you can kind of see it. And he's like, I didn't even know that existed. I'm like, yep, that figured as much. But so I actually got him to sign that, and I gave it to my dad, and that was a lot of fun. But I also met the voice for, Goku, Dragon Ball Z.
Oh, Masako.
That was a lot of Masako-san, yeah. That was actually in Kauai-kan, so in Hawaii. And her daughter, so she doesn't really travel very much internationally anymore, right? I think maybe she'll do a few, like, every couple years she'll do events or something. But I remember, sitting down and having lunch with her. And it's so much fun because her daughter, who manages her, kind of takes care of her when she goes traveling. And I think kind of helps out as well with, her jobs. And, but, we were talking, her daughter and I are about the same age. And so we were talking, about like anime that we grew up on. And I was like, oh my gosh, my favorite was this volleyball anime called Attack Number One, right? And and Masako-san's daughter said, oh, me too. And then she's like, Lisle, you do know, right, that my mom was in that. I was like, what? I'm so excited. I had this as a fangirl moment. I'm like, you're kidding! And then Masako-san's like, yeah, but here's the deal. So she was telling me the story about how, with her, she was always working so much when her daughter was young, right? And she, and she was like, yeah, I'm a cool mom. And her daughter's like, hey, yeah, no, not really. Whatever. I don't really care, right? Then she got this audition for Attack Number One. And she's like, oh, awesome. My daughter loves this anime. This will be great. Great way to connect. She gets, when she gets the job, she tells her daughter, she's like, hey, I am going to be on Attack Number One. And her daughter's like, oh, you're kidding. Oh my gosh, Mom, you're the best. You're the coolest mom in the world, right? And then the episodes, they're like, okay, let's watch the episode together. So they're sitting down at home watching the episode. And then her character comes on, and turns out it's the antagonist, right? So it's like the, bad, bully. It's the bully, mean girl from the team. And her daughter looked at her and was like, what? You're evil. And so she said, after that, my daughter wouldn't look at me, wouldn't talk to me. She's like, no. But that was kind of a fun moment. But yeah, I've met quite a few people from different seiyuu and worked with them. And that's been a lot of fun for me, too, because, getting to meet some of the people that I grew up with, in Japan and listened to. So.
My goodness. Her lungs must be like super powerful because she's still voicing Goku in any new like Dragon Ball media that they release.
They've never replaced her.
Yeah.
She's been from the beginning.
Yeah.
That's dedication right there, I gotta tell you.
She's been Kid Goku
Yeah.
all the way up to Adult Goku, and then back to Kid Goku, and then Adult Goku.
And the thing is, some of the characters like
Yeah.
Vegeta and them, you could kind of, well, the Japanese versions anyways, you could kind of sort of hear how the age is kind of affecting them, but like Goku still sounds the same after so many years. Like, jeez.
Yeah, it's crazy. I know. And she, so Masako-san's actually very good friends with Toshio-san, Furukawa Toshio as well. So there have been a few events where they have done panels together, and I can't even begin to tell you like how amazing those panels were, because they are both extremely, not just, I feel like in the whole AU voice acting, but even just in like their improv and just the way they kind of engage even a live audience, It's always such an honor and so much fun to really watch them go, especially when they're together. They really feed off of each other. So yeah. I do a Friday stream on Twitch. I just started about a month and a half ago, so still trying to get my bearings there, but I do it every Friday from 8 p.m. That's Pacific time, and usually about an hour. It's called The Adventures of a Blonde Geisha. So sometimes I'll bring in other voice actors that I worked with in Japan. Sometimes I'll bring in, I don't just talk about gaming and, the anime world, but I will bring in people like Kyle LeBear. I had him on a couple weeks ago, and we actually talked about radio, because we both got our start in radio. So we talked about that and about music. But I've also had people on to talk about other artists, like I mentioned, with the, Prince. I'm a huge fan of Prince and had the opportunity to work with him. So I have a fellow, one of my closest friends also worked with him during that time. So I'll bring her in and we'll talk about our, experience and kind of just how different it is and whatever. But, and you can, guys, you can cut all that out if you want. But please join me. It's The Adventures of a Blonde Geisha, and it's twitch.tv/Lisle Wilkersen. And I would love to have everyone on there. I try to get involved with the chat. A lot of times we'll have questions about Japan, growing up in Japan, or about working in Japan, whatnot. And, so I try to make it very interactive Twitch stream. It's a lot of fun. I enjoy it.
Yeah, and I'll put all the links below so everyone can check out like all your social media and other good stuff like that.
Yeah, and also I try to be as active as possible on Twitter, on Instagram, and on Facebook. So you can always find me there. On Instagram, I usually tend to have a lot of pictures and videos of my cats. They're quite entertaining and crazy, so, I'll always have little cat videos. But I will definitely send you all those links later.
There we go. And, guys, it's been a lot of fun. And, as you all know or may not know, depending how long you've been following the channel, we've got to meet Lisle before a couple of times. There's a couple of clips that will be popping up during this podcast. Other times we've met in the con. It's always been a great pleasure to meet you. Thanks for taking some time out of your busy schedule to join us. And yeah, we would like to have you again, sometime when you have like other projects, other things going on. We would glad to have you back here, and also if possible, once the world settles down, we would also love to see you again possibly at some convention in Vegas.
Absolutely, that'd be so much fun. I would love to see you guys in person. Maybe we can even give each other big bear hugs. Yay! And yeah, absolutely, I would love to come on again. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.
No problem, guys. So this is Mark Rodriguez here, signing off for tonight.
This is Johnny Rodriguez, and this has been a really nice podcast. I enjoyed it. It was very entertaining.
This is Jack Knives from Jack Knives Reviews, signing out.
This is Jupi saying, see ya everyone, and thank you for joining.
This is Aka Yue from twitch.tv/Aka Yue. It's nice being here.
Right. And see y'all next time, guys.
Bye.